10 Down WJ presents The Bitter Cup, Part 1. The Inner Abyss. Within the dim confines of her mind, Clara wrestled daily with her demons. The soft whispers of hatred and jealousy clawed at her consciousness, gnawing away at her sanity. Once a vibrant woman with dreams and aspirations, life had molded her into a bitter shell of her former self. Years of unfulfilled desires, betrayals, and abandonment had twisted her heart into something grotesque. Clara, in her late 40s, had been the kind of woman who could light up a room with her laughter, but that was long gone. Instead, she now reveled in the darkness, letting it seep into her veins, infecting every thought, every action. The scriptures echoed in her mind, "He who hates his brother is a murderer." She often dismissed these words, convinced that they did not apply to her. But deep down, a flicker of understanding gnawed at her. She knew the truth of her heart. Her hatred was not confined to strangers, it had crept into her relationships with those she once loved. Her children, her grandchildren, and even her former lovers were not immune to her wrath. Clara had become a puppet of her internal turmoil, pulling strings that not only affected her but also wreaked havoc on the lives of those around her. Part 2. The Fork of Malice. One fateful evening, Clara sat in her dimly lit kitchen, the walls adorned with peeling wallpaper that mirrored her crumbling psyche. In her hand, she held a gleaming fork, its metallic sheen reflecting the dim light. But this was no ordinary utensil. Clara had made it her tool of vengeance. With a twisted grin, she devised a plan to lure her unsuspecting guests into her web of deceit. She'd heard rumors of a gathering at her neighbor's house, a potluck where everyone would bring their favorite dish. Clara decided she would join, but not with food. Instead, she would offer her special fork, her fork, which she had deliberately contaminated with her own blood, knowing all too well the consequences of her actions. As the gathering began, Clara felt a surge of excitement. She watched as people laughed and shared stories, oblivious to the malice lurking behind her facade. When the moment was right, she approached a group holding their plates, her fork poised like a weapon. "Here, try my fork," she said sweetly, her eyes glinting with a frenzied light. "It's special. I promise it'll add flavor to your meal." One by one, they accepted her offering, ignorant of the darkness entwined within it. Clara reveled in their trust, her heart swelling with satisfaction. But beneath that satisfaction lay a festering hatred, a desire to see them suffer as she had. Part 3. The Shower of Horror. Among those who fell prey to Clara's malevolence was David, a man she had once loved. Their relationship had ended in shambles, fueled by her jealousy and manipulation. In the years since, David had moved on, but Clara's hatred only intensified. One evening, as David stood in his shower, the steam curling around him like a lover's embrace, he reached for his 3-in-1 body wash. The familiar scent enveloped him, a reminder of simpler times. But as he raised the bottle above his head, his world shattered. With a sudden burst, Clara's period blood poured from the bottle, cascading down like a grotesque waterfall. David froze, horror etched on his face as he realized the depths of Clara's spite. The memory of their past together twisted into a nightmarish reality. The very essence of her hatred had seeped into his life, tainting everything he had built for himself. In that moment, David understood that Clara was not just a bitter woman, she was a vessel of destruction, a being consumed by her internal conflict. He felt the weight of her darkness pressing against him, suffocating and relentless. Part 4. The Piss-Pink Lemonade. Clara's twisted games didn't stop with David. She continued her reign of terror, now targeting her grandchildren, the innocent souls who looked up to her. One sunny afternoon, she invited them over for a picnic in her backyard, her eyes gleaming with a sinister delight. As they played in the grass, Clara prepared a refreshing drink, one she called Piss-Pink Lemonade. The name was a cruel joke, but her grandchildren were too young to understand its implications. She mixed the lemonade with her own urine, giggling at the thought of their unsuspecting faces. When she served the drinks, Clara's heart raced with excitement. "Drink up, my darlings. It's a special recipe," she beamed, watching as they took eager sips. They laughed, unaware of the darkness that lurked within their beloved grandmother. But as they laughed, Clara felt the devil within her whispering sweet nothings, urging her to continue her reign of terror. "Have you come to torment me before the time?" The voice echoed, mocking her. "We beseech thee, send us not into the abyss, but into the pigs we will go. Part 5. The Unclean Spirit. Clara's actions became increasingly erratic as the internal conflict raged on. She began to hear voices, shadows dancing at the corners of her vision. The devil within her had taken hold, feeding off her hatred and driving her further into madness. Her nights were filled with nightmares, flashes of her past haunting her sleep. The faces of those she had wronged, the laughter of her grandchildren turned to screams, tormenting her. She was trapped in a cycle of self-destruction, sabotaging any chance of redemption. As the days turned into weeks, Clara's grip on reality weakened. Friends became distant, family estranged, and her once vibrant home became a mausoleum of her bitterness. She was alone, surrounded by the ghosts of her own making. Part 6. Confrontation with the Past. One stormy night, David returned to confront Clara. He could no longer ignore the darkness that had seeped into his life. As he stood at her doorstep, he felt a mix of anger and pity. The woman he had once loved was now a shell, consumed by her own hatred. Clara opened the door, surprise etched on her face. "What do you want?" she spat, her voice dripping with venom. "I want to understand," David replied, his tone steady. "Why, Clara, why do you do this?" For a moment, Clara's facade cracked, revealing the woman she used to be. Tears welled in her eyes as she struggled to articulate her pain. "I don't know," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I'm lost." David stepped closer, his heart aching for the woman he had once known. "You can't keep hurting people, Clara. It's destroying you." As their eyes locked, Clara felt the weight of her actions crashing down upon her. The realization that she had become a vessel of hatred, a murderer in spirit, engulfed her. "I don't know how to stop," she admitted, her voice breaking. Part 7. The Path to Redemption. In that moment, something shifted within Clara. The devil that had taken root within her felt threatened, recoiling at the prospect of being cast into outer darkness. Clara stood at a crossroads, the choice between darkness and redemption laid bare before her. David extended a hand, a lifeline in the storm of her despair. "You have to confront your demons, Clara. You can't keep running from them." With trembling hands, Clara reached out, grasping his hand tightly. "I want to change," she whispered, the weight of her past heavy on her heart. As they stood together, the storm outside raged on, but within Clara, a flicker of hope ignited. It would be a long and arduous journey, but for the first time in years, she felt the possibility of redemption. The unclean spirit within her began to wane, retreating into the shadows as she took a step toward healing. Part 8. The Healing Journey. Clara's path to redemption was not easy. It required confronting the pain of her past, the wounds that had festered and grown into bitterness. With David's support, she sought therapy, faced the demons that had haunted her, and began to rebuild the relationships she had destroyed. Her grandchildren, once wary of her, slowly began to trust her again. Clara made amends, not only with them but with those she had hurt in her past. The journey was filled with tears and setbacks, but with each step, Clara felt the darkness lift. As the months passed, Clara transformed. The laughter that had once been absent from her home began to return, replacing the echoes of hatred with joy. She learned to channel her pain into something constructive, volunteering at local shelters and helping those in need. Part 9. The New Dawn. Years later, as Clara stood in her kitchen, she reflected on her journey. The forks and glasses that once symbolized her malice had been replaced with a warmth that filled her heart. The bitterness that had consumed her was now a distant memory, replaced by compassion and love. As she prepared a meal for her grandchildren, she felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. The devil that once tormented her had been cast out, replaced by a spirit of healing. Clara understood the truth of the scriptures now: hatred only leads to destruction, but love fosters life. In that moment, Clara whispered a prayer of thanks, her heart light and free. She had come to understand that the path to redemption was not just about confronting the darkness within but embracing the light that lay ahead. And as she set the table, she knew that her journey was far from over, it had only just begun. 10 Down WJ, where creativity meets impact. 10 Down WJ, ENT